Hello, this is Never Heard of It podcast. I'm Sean Harwell.
And I'm Craig Moorhead, and this is the podcast where we talk about the movies that have fallen through or around your cracks.
That's right, and we've got a heck of a movie to fit through our cracks today because it's called Rhinoceros.
Ooh.
This is a 1974, I've seen it called a comedy, fantasy, etc. Movie directed by Tom O'Horgan, based on the screenplay by noted playwright Eugene Ionescu, starring Zero Mostel and Gene Wilder, and also a lovely appearance by Karen Black. This movie was suggested to us by listener and friend of the show, David Piles. David, thank you. And we hope you'll make suggestions as well. You can find us at neverheardpodcast.com, on Twitter at neverpodcast, on Facebook, on YouTube, etc. So come say hello.
Hello.
Craig, how are you?
I'm doing all right, Sean. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good, pretty good. I have not transitioned into a pachyderm today.
That's good. That's probably a sign that everything is going well.
Yeah, I mean, for a Wednesday, it's not too bad, right?
It's true.
Well, obviously, I think that should bring us to our synopsis, which is coming today from Wikipedia. Now, this is Rhinoceros again, and the plot of Rhinoceros is this. The residents of a large town are inexplicably turning into rhinoceroses. Stanley, played by Gene Wilder, is a mild-mannered office clerk who watches the bizarre transformations from a bemused distance. But soon the strange occurrences invade his personal space as his neighbor and best friend John, played by Zero Mostel, and his girlfriend Daisy, played by Karen Black, become part of the human into rhinoceros metamorphosis that is taking place. Eventually, Stanley realizes that he may be the only human left amidst the new rhinoceros majority. Craig, obviously, I had never heard of this movie because that's why we chose it. You had, in fact, you mentioned that you had seen this as a play. Now, I'm curious, let's go ahead and just kind of talk about this a little bit. How recently did you see the play?
Over a decade ago.
Okay, so not that
No,
recently.
it's been a while.
Did you remember? Okay, well, first of all, did you know what the play was about when you went to see it, if you can recall?
I had no clue. A friend of mine was in it here in D.C. It sounded like a fun thing to go see. I knew the general premise of it, but I had no idea about its history, its playwright, none of that. So I went in fairly cold into that play.
And at the time, did you have any idea that there was a film adaptation of it?
No.
Yeah,
Until we heard about this now, I had no idea there was a film adaptation of it.
I knew absolutely nothing about it. And in fact, I didn't read the synopsis or anything. So I got to say, like, the way the movie kind of unfolds, I did not realize that people were turning into rhinoceroses for quite some time. I think that might have helped me a little bit, but I did figure that out, obviously. I think it becomes extremely clear, specifically in one scene involving, John, the neighbor upstairs, played by Zero Mostel. But I don't know, it was an interesting experience for sure. This is definitely a movie that does not have much of a modern counterpart that I know of. But I'm kind of curious, like, what are just your initial thoughts on this thing? Specifically, we can talk a little bit later, but just, as far as, if you want to say right now whether you enjoyed it more than the play or less than the play, I think that might be kind of interesting to know. But what are your kind of basic, primal thoughts on this movie?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny watching it. I was reminded of the play. I was kind of surprised about how much of the play I remembered watching the movie. The play itself was basically in a black box, so very minimal set. So it was you had even less contextual clues as to things that were going on. So it was kind of nice to have all this sort of filled in, and you kind of felt like, oh, well, I'm a little bit more in a realistic setting, even though nothing that I'm watching feels terribly
right.
Realistic.
Yeah.
Did I enjoy it? Absolutely. Did I understand every bit of it? Not necessarily. Right. There's a lot to chew on. There's a lot that wants to chew on you.
Ooh.
Yeah. I don't know what that means, but it sounded smart. But yeah, I mean, the experience of watching the movie, I enjoyed it a good bit.
One of the things I want to just talk about real quickly is, in the movie, you're sort of treated this, it's just a fun little title sequence. You're almost like the Odd Couple, where you're seeing Zero Mostel is very put together, almost like a dandy of sorts, wearing his suit and walking through town and, literally dusting off a homeless person with a handkerchief. And then, you're comparing that to Gene Wilder, who's waking up with a clear hangover. His tie is like tied around his head. He drops his alarm clock in the toilet, all this stuff. And then they come together in a restaurant, and that scene sort of unfolds, and you get the sense. I think maybe I did know that this was based on a play because we had talked about that, but pretty much from the get-go there, yeah, it feels like these are two people that are conversing in a way that I recognize as being theatrical, and that's not to say that anything that this playwright Ionesco has done, that if this is any indication, we're not talking about big set pieces, musical numbers or anything like that. It is more like just straight dialogue,
and you might say stagey dialogue.
Definitely. There's a lot of sort of like call and response of sorts. There's questions that get answered by other questions, well, that aren't really answers at all. One of the things I thought was interesting, though, is, you sort of pretty much, it's within that first scene, probably within the first 5-10 minutes, hear about the fact that there is a rhinoceros on the loose. And you never actually see a rhinoceros throughout the entirety of this movie. But they use a lot of baddish sound effects and a lot of the sounds of like hooves on pavements and shaking. And it's sort of like rattling the entire town, which I don't know if a rhinoceros would actually do that or not. But I was wondering if that was sort of duplicated in the stage version, or how did they handle that? Was that all just kind of pumped in through the PA?
Yeah.
As far as like these rhinoceros noises?
I mean, as I remember, it was very, very similar. Yeah, you don't ever see an actual rhinoceros. I think there was, much like this, you saw a shadow of a rhinoceros, but most of it was sound effects. And I mean, and that was it. There was really no really a visual representation of an actual rhinoceros anywhere.
Well, and now how did that work for you in the film? Because I after a while, I definitely... Well, it might be not even after a while. I mean, pretty early on, I'm like, it would have been nice to see a rhinoceros.
Yeah. Well,
it's like you kind of want, they sort of cheat around that in so many ways that.
Well, it's a good question. I mean, what is the choice there? It seems like there's a conscious choice. We're not going to show any rhinoceros, maybe because it would be too expensive to deal with it. But yeah, I mean, you definitely start to feel it definitely feels more and more like a play as you go on, and it feels very claustrophobic. And I don't know how much that helps the story that it feels claustrophobic. You're in his apartment for a very long time. You never get to go outside. There's always something outside that you kind of want to be able to see that you never get to see, which at times was a little distracting.
Yeah, and there's part of me saying that now that it is like, well, I don't know, if I saw a rhinoceros, would I somehow be disappointed? Like, would you lose some of what's just kind of absurd and farcical about the whole thing? Or would you lose some of that mystery even if they did show it?
Yeah.
But I think, all of this kind of plays into tone, and we're going to talk about that a little bit, and sort of the choices and where this kind of movie veers in sort of broad comedy strokes. But I thought maybe before we do that, it might be interesting to just kind of make sure we cover our bases as far as the intentions of these things. And Ionesco, I'm just reading from Wikipedia here, but he was French-Romanian playwright, mostly wrote in French, and was one of the foremost figures of the French avant-garde theater. It says, beyond ridiculing the most banal situations, his plays depict the solitude and insignificance of human existence in a tangible way. I think that's important to know because that's clearly on display in this movie. But this movie also is a byproduct of something that was called the American Film Theater. And this I thought was really, really kind of fascinating. I don't know if you looked at this at all, but again, from Wikipedia here, this was a limited run series of film adaptations of stage plays. And they did 2 seasons of this from 73 to 75. They made 14 movies, which is super impressive. I don't care what you're doing in those movies, just to make 14 period is impressive. They were 500 theaters in 400 cities, admission based on subscription to the entire series.
Oh, wow.
I've never in my life heard of anything like that before.
No. And to get that, how do you get that going in the 70s?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think there's like film societies that obviously like you can pay like an annual fee and they'll show like, the classics and stuff like that. But this, totally foreign to me. It's really kind of interesting and cool. I'd love to know more about it, and there's not a ton here. But it says, by design, these were not films of stage productions, they were plays translated to the film medium, but with complete faithfulness to the original script. So as I read that, I would assume that to mean they did not cut any dialogue.
Right.
I would say at least, obviously there's probably some interpretation that has to go, and adaptation that has to go on as far as like stage direction, setting, probably a little bit. You're looking through the list of movies that they made, there's only really one that kind of stands out to me is The Iceman Cometh, which was directed by John Frankenheimer.
So if they're making all those movies in a pretty short amount of time, then that explains the budgetary. I mean, they are essentially shooting.
They would have
plays.
to be small budget, I'm sure.
So yeah. That is interesting. That's a really interesting deal to put together back then.
Yeah, and like again, I just think it's important to note because then you sort of know this was not being made to be the sequel to The Producers, right? Yeah. Or was this before The Producers? I can't even.
This was after The Producers,
right?
And that's one of the things that was so interesting to me, and I'll just kind of jump to it real quick, just as a question that maybe hangs over the rest of the podcast. I don't know, but I remember watching the stage version. And I remember at the beginning thinking, I'm watching a comedy, but very soon after that, it did not feel funny at all. No one was playing it for laughs. It seemed really bizarre at first, and it's like, oh, that's really weird. But as it went on, you realize, no, this is not something that's really meant to be funny. It doesn't feel funny. So then casting The Producers, I mean, one of the funniest movies of all time, Gene Wilder, easily one of the funniest guys of all time, Zero Mostel, no slouch either. And I mean, kind of, definitely hamming it up, definitely taking it over the top.
I mean, you don't get more over the top than specifically with Mostel in his apartment where he transitions to the rhinoceros. That's as insane as anything you've ever seen, I think.
Yeah, and I was thinking during that scene, first of all, at first I thought, oh, wow, yeah, really hamming it up, really going over the top. But then at the same time, I thought, well, I don't know, what would be better than this? Who would do this better than this?
Right, and also, like, I didn't find myself kind of laughing at those moments. I mean, there's little things within that, like when he's checking out the bump on his forehead, which is supposed to be the indication of the horn coming through. He looks in one mirror and then scoots 2 centimeters to the left, and there's another mirror, and then does it again on the other wall. There's another mirror. Like, there's little things like that. That's like physical comedy and just sort of good staging in a comedic way. But then, some of the dialogue and just the physical, like, stuff he was doing with his voice, like that didn't, it doesn't strike me as the same sort of brand of comedy, I guess.
Yeah.
It's not like you're getting one sort of gag throughout.
Right.
And even man, within that opening scene at the restaurant, it does sort of start out as this very kind of, that's not a jokey conversation about alcoholism, really. Gene Wilder is definitely a man of the sauce, and he's, let me find the quote here, but he's basically saying, here it is, it's like, I just can't get used to life. When Saturday comes around, I'm exhausted from having done nothing with my life. I need some kind of lift, diversion, so I drink. I mean,
yeah.
You put that in Nicolas Cage's mouth in Las Vegas, and you've got
a heavy
really
drama.
Depressing drama,
yeah.
Right?
And then you have a scene like where Gene Wilder is trying to board up his windows, which is pure slapstick.
Yeah, for sure. But within that opening scene at the restaurant, when the rhinoceros is run by, 6-10 minutes later. And this is after Mostel and Wilder have gone to the bathroom and are dancing around, doing all kinds of weird stuff.
Yeah.
You've got a man falling face first into a cake. You've got a woman literally hanging from a ceiling fan that's spinning around. It's like sheer chaos. There's like dishes being broken and all this stuff. And it's, it's not at a place with something you might see in Blazing Saddles, And so it just, I don't know, it went back and forth on that stuff a lot. And Craig, just remind me again, you're saying that what was the tonal consistency in the play? Was it a bit like that or no? Did they have a man fall in a cake?
There were no cakes involved.
A waiter?
As I remember, it was really only the 2 characters. Like, it was really... It wasn't just 2. Because I guess he still had his coworkers.
The office
there was
coworkers?
Still Daisy
Yeah.
and all that. But there certainly wasn't... As I remembered anyway, there wasn't like a busy restaurant scene. None of that kind of stuff. And it definitely felt heavier and heavier as it went on. It was... either a guy is losing his mind, or all of his friends are losing their what do I want to say?
Well, that they're losing their individuality.
Losing
I guess.
their individuality.
I mean, they're literally joining
Yeah.
a herd. You know,
The word that pops into my mind is dignity, and that's not it. It is.
Yeah. Because there's a very lengthy discussion about the dignity of nature versus humans
Yes.
and all that stuff. You know, and some funny stuff in that too.
But
actually.
it's people being sucked into, essentially being sucked into a bad idea. The bad idea being turning into a rhinoceros. Not a good idea,
Right.
but somehow it starts to look very attractive, and the more people that turn into rhinoceroses, the more people want to be rhinoceroses.
Right, and this is probably most exemplified by the character Carl, who is he's sort of the loudmouth of the office. I think they're all CPAs at this very tiny office that employs 4 people, a boss, 3 CPAs, and Daisy, so 5, the Karen Black character. You know, but he's the one that doesn't believe in that anyone saw a rhinoceros. He thinks the whole thing was made up, and you know, he's very sort of anti-establishment and the boss and all this kind of stuff. And then I think he's like the second one to turn into it, you know, and they even have like a line about it. Like, after all those years complaining about the boss, he ends up being just like him, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and that's obviously the point. I mean, it's a little on the nose. You know, I will say, like, it was also kind of interesting, you know, there's one little moment that stuck out as being sort of meta and self-referential where, you know, Mostel is talking about, you know, Gene Wilder not getting out and not enjoying life and just drinking and, you know, being in the humdrums of his office job. And he's like, you got to get out and enjoy culture and, you know, taking the avant-garde theater and the plays of, and he takes his hat off and very dramatically says, Eugene Ionesco, you know. Well, let's talk about, I mean, I think we can't not talk about Karen Black anytime you got Karen Black in a movie. Definitely a different role for her than I've seen before. I mean, is sort of still kind of that blonde bombshell, big hair, big boobs, slightly innocent. I mean, I don't want to say ditzy because she's not in this entirely, but she's still got some of that mold, and yet, I don't know, I just felt like she had like an interesting perspective and she brought some interesting stuff to that role. You know, the guys in the office kind of fawn over her, but kind of don't. But she's clearly sort of smitten with Stanley, with Gene Wilder. Mm-hmm. I don't know. What did you think of her in this? Like, it's an interesting place to land with a casting decision with getting Karen Black. And I was kind of curious as to what this character in that play you saw, was she anything like that or playing it the same way or what?
The strange thing is, I don't remember that character in the play.
At all?
I don't remember any.
No
I
kidding.
mean, I remember the character being there, but I don't remember any of the moments in the movie.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Which is really bizarre. Yeah, I mean, as far as casting her in that, I mean, I don't really necessarily have any strong feelings about it. She does a fine job.
Yeah, I kind of wanted a little more. Like, you know, she's there at the end. She's sort of the last one standing with him, but then they kind of end up having a disagreement. I guess that's sort of like the beginning of her transition. You're starting to see that, you know. And I wrote down this one line, which I thought was great. Like, he says something about... She's talking about, oh, listen to the rhinoceroses out there. Don't they sound so sweet? They're singing and talking. And he says something like, well, I guess if you can call that a language. And she says, can you honestly say it isn't? You're not a language expert. And like just the way like she delivered that, you're not a language expert line was as if she believed that with every fiber of her being.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. And like that was like, unfortunately, I think one of the last things that she says in the movie, I was like, no, I want more of like that. I want to see them kind of, in a way, it's sort of having a similar conversation that he had with Zero Mostel, and Zero Mostel was just in the sheer delirium of turning into a rhinoceros, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas some of that stuff was, yeah, like you were saying, it was like so broad, and broad's not even the right word. It's just out of control and over the top, and Robert Downey Jr. level Hail Caesar. You know, an actor unleashed to his full capacities. And I don't know, she just had like a different tweak on what that would look like. And I was like, oh, I really kind of would love to see that.
Yeah.
Because it was like she was sort of, you know, the last refuge for him anyway.
Right.
And then let's talk about that then, because I mean, like, what do you take away as far as the meaning of this movie? You know, it ends with him, you know, basically you are following a play structure in the sense that the movie is what, about 4 or 5 acts. You know, there's a scene in a restaurant, there's a scene at the office, and there's a scene in Zero Mostel's apartment, and there's a scene in Gene Wilder's apartment. And that's pretty much it, right?
That's pretty much it, yeah.
By the end of it, you know, you've had a lot of just sort of like these big kind of dialogue scenes, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and I don't want to take away that, but you know, it kind of becomes the question of, does Gene Wilder accept the fact that maybe it would be good to be a rhinoceros, or that there's value in being a human? Like, I'm just a human. Like, I think he says that. He's like, I want to change, but I can't, which I think is metaphorically kind of interesting, because it's, you know, you could touch back on the alcoholism thing, but also, I don't know. The one sort of like review I looked at of this was saying that it was somewhat kind of trite. If it's just saying nonconformity has value, like if everybody was an animal, would you really want to be an animal? You know, don't sink to that level. That's all this movie is saying, and takes a sort of weird route to say that rather obviously. I don't know. Did you sort of chew on anything else?
Well,
thematically with this movie?
Here's what I was chewing on. After watching it, I read up on, you know, what his whole point was, and where he was coming, cool. Where Ionesco was coming from when he wrote it.
So you have an informed opinion.
I actually have an informed opinion. Uninformed opinion. This could maybe be a whole new department on our show. And we only have one informed opinion in every show.
We're breaking new ground here, folks.
So, to make a long story short, because I don't understand every detail, but Ionesco was Romanian. He grew up in Romania. He saw a lot of his friends go from people that he understood and could argue and debate things with, to people who joined what was known as the Iron Guard. And the Iron Guard was ultra-nationalist, what was it? Anti-communist, anti-capitalist, anti-Semitic group.
They were against
everything. They hated everything.
Wow.
But this play was his response to that. It was that one day you'd be talking to someone and they'd say, yes, the Iron Guard is terrible, except for that one point. That one point, they kind of have a point about that. And then 3 days later, that person's the Iron Guard. So the Iron Guard is basically the rhinoceri.
The rhinoceros, okay.
As I watched the movie, I kind of thought of it in terms of, because I am not a Trump supporter, and I don't want to get into a political argument with anyone, because I know you are, but
right.
As a non-Trump supporter, I thought of, you know, the rhinoceri as I don't know, Trump folks who they kind of get that there's like one little idea. Well, that little idea seems all right, and everyone else is supporting him, and he keeps saying things, and no one's calling it. So maybe everything's fine, and I can just feel that way, and I'll just give myself over to this bad idea. The thing that really struck me as I went through it wasn't so much about the nonconformity, but there were certain bits of the ideas in the movie that I couldn't quite parse. And I guess what it comes down to is this, like, obviously, yeah, a lot of it is about not conforming, not just deciding to become a dumb animal.
Or apologizing for the dumb animal, I guess.
Right,
too,
right. Know? But I guess what I couldn't get rid of, because the movie plays it pretty vague as far as what the ideas of the rhinoceros are, right? It's not like sure. People are like, Jews are evil, and then they become rhinoceros. Like if everyone said Jews are evil, and then you become a rhinoceros, then clearly being a rhinoceros is not great. But instead, it was just people who are sort of turning into rhinoceroses and becoming seduced by the rhinoceros song.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. Yeah.
And so there was a part of it to me. Clearly, it has a point about nonconformity, but then there's a part of it to me where I feel like, okay, but what if your nature is to be a rhinoceros? Like right now, we live in a time where people are transforming themselves by God. I mean, to become what they feel like inside. Okay, and again, clearly that's not the point that the movie's really making, but a part of me felt like, but what if some of them were not rhinoceroses? And they just shouldn't be? And it's just bad? And that kind of led to another thing where, many times Gene Wilder seems like he is he doesn't want things to change. And it seems like parts of the conversation about he doesn't want things to change and he wants things to stay the way they are. And that was another idea to me where I'm like, okay, so that sounds like you sound like the person who doesn't want to move into the future. You don't want to go into the civil rights era, for instance. I want things to be like in the 1950s,
You mean when America was great?
Exactly. Making America great again, which brings us back to President Trump. So I guess, for me, I had a lot of that stuff battling throughout, which kind of muddied the waters, I guess, a little bit. And then you end with him saying he will not capitulate, he will not become the rhinoceroses, and so you kind of have to decide that the rhinoceros are bad, and therefore he is a hero. I guess maybe not. Maybe that's not the point at all. Really, maybe the whole point is to sit there and say, is he right for not capitulating? I don't know.
Yeah. I think I'm not up to speed on my avant-garde anything, but I feel like when you throw that term around, like it does sort of loosen the restrictions of finding some sort of concrete, literal or singular interpretation. Obviously, I don't know. I felt that too a little bit because of the setup where Wilder spends a good chunk of that first interaction with with John, talking about the doldrums of his job. And then you see his job, and he shows up late, and within minutes it's completely distracted, and like nobody does any work. So it's like, well, this ain't that bad. It's like there's this funny group of people here, and then there's this girl that's great, and you get Mrs. Bingham running in, screaming at the top of her lungs about her husband, who also works there but didn't show up for work today because he turned into a rhinoceros. So I don't know. It was hard for me to sort of parse that out a little bit as well. Like if that's the conformed life, that kind of 9-to-5 business life a little bit, which, I think at this point we've seen over and over, pounded in our head that Revolutionary Road or whatever the case may be,
right.
the movie, and people that feel handcuffed into that world, which also to me feels a little preachy in those instances too. It's there's a lot of people where that world is just perfectly great for and does a lot of good things. Yeah, so I don't know. It was interesting to me, he definitely at the very end has a very dramatic, large gesture of climbing up onto the roof and speechifying a little bit, saying, I'm just a human being, that's all, I'll never capitulate. You get a pretty awesome freeze frame ending,
yes,
which I'm always a fan of, especially with a little bit of dialogue echo, which they had here.
Love it.
I will say, I think there was one little goof in the sense that we're led to believe at this ending here that Wilder is, in fact, the last human, at least in this area, and he's climbing up the ladder to the rooftop. I swear I think I saw another human being looking out the window in the building across the street.
That's funny. But, I didn't see that myself, but I remember throughout that entire sequence, I kept thinking, I wonder how many times they had to do this so that no planes were flying overhead or anything like that.
Yeah, it would have been tough, yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting movie. I think there's definitely a lot to think about and consider on that theme. I think that's one of the beauties of just kind of throwing it out there the way that they did, is that it at least leads to the discussion of, what's the nature of the rhinoceros? What does that mean exactly?
It can fit a lot of scenarios.
Yeah, it really can. And I don't know. I think if nothing else, I will watch the hell out of anything with Gene Wilder in it. He's just
Absolutely.
so good. And even in this, I could see that role going to somebody else that doesn't have that kind of lovable, sympathetic sadness behind him, that it feels like it would have fallen apart in a lot of ways without that. And I will say, anytime that guy raises his voice, it's hysterical to me. I don't care what he's saying. And in this, because some of it is sort of the stuff he's saying is not necessarily easy to sort out as far as terms of plot or character or anything like that. It's not a joke in the sense of screaming that my grandfather's work was doo-doo in Young Frankenstein, which he did so well. But man, there's just something about the pitch of his voice that is so funny when he raises it. He's just got one of those things. You have a favorite Gene Wilder movie?
Anything he did with Richard Pryor should be seen.
Yeah.
But honestly, I mean, I have to go back to Producers because I think one of the funniest things I've ever seen in a movie in my life is when he's having a panic attack at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And I mean, To me, that's just like everything that is great about Gene Wilder is right there in that moment, and I just like love him for that. What about you?
I'm a Young Frankenstein guy for sure. I like that. I mean, I think Blazing Saddles is really great too, and that's a pretty small, different kind of role. Also, don't forget he had a really great bit part in Bonnie and Clyde that I like a lot as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's so many of them.
There really are. We could talk about them all day.
He is a treasure.
He is.
Well, I don't know. I don't really have a whole lot left on that movie. I think it's definitely worth checking out. It's on Amazon. It's not a terrible version. Quality's okay, I guess. Yeah. I'd say okay. What about you? Is this something you would recommend? I think you have to recommend this to a very specific person. It's not something that you're not going to do a double feature of Willy Wonka and this for your kids.
No. I mean, you want whoever your friend is who really likes to think about their movies and maybe watch a movie once or twice and, I don't know, think about the big stuff. That's the person you want. If you have some friends who have just been through a hard day and just need to watch something, don't go with go with the producers. That'd be fine.
Yeah, sure.
It's still smart. But hey, let's do a pitch, bitch.
I like that. That's a good tagline.
Thank you.
Okay. I think hands down, this is a premise that works in a lot of different ways. Sure. And my very, very simple pitch to you, Craig, is I would love to see a version where you do see everyone turning into some other species, be it a rhinoceros or something like that, and just, take advantage of our wonderful CGI workers whose names dominate the end of every single movie these days. I think I would take it away from being such a heavy interaction between like 2 or 3 people thing and really sort of make it about one guy kind of going through the world, slowly realizing that everybody else is turning into something non-human and he's not. And not have it be about zombies or horror or anything like that. I think the fear in this movie is played comical when they're scared of the rhinoceros, and that works okay. And I think that's a big animal. You would be afraid of that. Right. That makes sense. But I don't know. I mean, there is something really kind of fascinating to me about that general premise.
Yeah. No.
What about you? You've got something better, I can tell.
Well, I don't know if it's better, Sean. I'll be honest with you. First I have to start off by saying this. There's a 2008 movie called Zombie Strippers that at least they say that is Rhinoceros, but it's about zombie strippers. I have not seen the movie yet, but I'm definitely going to check it out.
Yeah, I thought of zombies while watching
this.
And definitely the reactions are similar to some of what you've seen before.
Naturally so.
In that genre.
I thought of I Am Legend. But when he's sitting up there on that rooftop and he's smoking the cigarette, here's what I thought when he started doing that, which was I would still want it to be Gene Wilder. We still got to get Gene Wilder out there.
Yeah.
I don't know what the title is going to be yet, but...
Rhinoceros 2?
Yeah, probably. I mean, if we want people to get excited about it, I guess we got to base it on this property, right?
Rhinos and winos?
But the thing is, because he's an alcoholic, he smokes. But the whole idea in this one is we kind of come in where he's realizing that he is humanity's last hope, and therefore he can't be smoking and drinking, right. And so really what the movie isn't so much about him. It's not an action adventure where he saves humanity. It's kind of the stuff in betweener stuff where it's just like
he saves himself.
Well, like he's gonna go up some stairs, but the stairs are wet, and he's like, oh, well, if I slip and fall, I'm just going to die, so I can't. So he has to be very careful about everything. He is it. He is all humanity has until maybe at the end we make it super bleak, and he realizes at the end, well, maybe humanity's not supposed to survive. If I'm the last one, and I'm clearly a moron.
I mean, he's not going to be impregnating anyone. It doesn't sound like
It doesn't
so that's
sound
out
like
the
it.
board.
I
Just
feel like
dies with
once we
him.
get this to the studio, they're going to make us give him a love interest, and that's going to ruin everything. And we don't want to skew over to what's his name's house, Last Man on Earth, Will Forte, because he's doing a great job with that over there. That's not what we want to do.
Right.
This is about a guy who has to save humanity, doesn't know how to save humanity, but only knows he has to at least stay alive until he figures out how to save humanity. And that's the movie. That's the movie.
I like that. Yeah. I mean, there's something simple and interesting to that.
Very low budget, micro budget.
What about structurally? Would you do anything like this movie? Or would you completely blow that up?
No, I don't think it'll be anything like this.
Yeah.
I think it would, because it would really be, it would really hinge on whoever that perform. That's why it has to be, I think, Gene Wilder, because you have to really be with somebody that you want to be with for an hour and a half, because he's going to be it. And I don't know. I don't think people have turned into rhinoceroses, but there has to be like some kind of hope that he can restart the humanity engine, and that's the title, Humanity Engine. That's a sci-fi title, right? That could work.
Yes.
So anyway, that's my $1 billion idea tonight.
And the tagline will be, make sure to check your oil.
Yeah, nice.
This is definitely fertile ground, and I think that's what's interesting about it. There's just a lot going on within that very, very simple concept, and this is a very, very specific way to do that.
I agree.
In this movie. So check it out, and let us know what you think of it when you get a chance. And until then, Craig, I think maybe let's move on and talk about what we're going to do next time.
Let's talk about it, Shaw.
Well, we've got another listener suggestion, and I know some of you out there have already made suggestions a while ago, and yeah, we're going to get to those too. But this time, we are going to take the advice of a Twitter user named @9hourfilms, and I don't think this movie that they suggested is in itself 9 hours long.
I hope not.
But it's called Monsieur Verdoux.
Excellent pronunciation,
Yeah,
by the way.
I think so.
Excellent pronunciation.
And this is 1947 Charlie Chaplin movie. It's also got Orson Welles. And they wrote the screenplay together.
Can't beat it.
Get out of town. Are you serious?
It seems like it should be the biggest movie in history.
If it's 9 hours, it could be, you know.
That's true.
You'll have to look around to find this. I don't know that it's streaming per se, but there is a Criterion version out. Definitely that might be worth looking into. And then I noticed it is available for rent on Amazon, and I would assume iTunes. So check that out, Monsieur Verdoux.
Very nice.
And we'll be back next time to talk that out. And thanks again for making that suggestion. And we look forward to getting to the rest of them.
That's right. Thanks for listening. Go hit that subscribe button over at iTunes and make us rich. Thank you.
Richer.
Sure, yeah, let's face it.
All right. Enjoyed it. Bye-bye.